Welcome to this series where I'm going to be talking about some sexual difficulties and some solutions. And actually, what I would like to prepare you for is that a lot of these solutions are really helpful, not just for people who are actually having some kind of difficulty, but just for general sexual enhancement and increasing of pleasure and things like that. So I think this will be a useful chapter, even if you've never had or never will have any kind of sexual difficulty. It'll be helpful for improving sexual functioning in general. All right, so we're going to return to something that we've discussed several times across this course, which is the role of the autonomic nervous system in arousal and sexual functioning. And I have not ever called it the autonomic nervous system before, but I've talked quite a bit about the role of the hypothalamus controlling the endocrine system. Well, the autonomic nervous system is connected to that same basic system. And so what we're seeing in this picture is on the left side, those parts of the body that are controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our body that is part of our brain that is designed to react to threats or other kinds of arousal. And so it triggers our fight or flight response. So the sympathetic nervous system dilates our pupils, relaxes our airways so we can get more air in. It inhibits salivation, so you get a dry mouth. It constricts blood vessels, so your blood pressure goes up. It accelerates your heart rate, makes you start sweating. You release a bunch of glucose out into your bloodstream to power your muscles. There are some other things going on there that I'm going to skip over and go down to. Inhibits digestion. So that's at the stomach and at the intestinal level. It inhibits voiding of the bladder so that it's less likely that you'll actually urinate during this time. You get a bunch of norepinephrine and epinephrine out of your adrenal glands. If you guys recall back, we talked about the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So the adrenal glands are responding to that axis. So all that stuff is a bunch of biological body stuff that happens when you're under threat or you're fearful. Interestingly enough, it's also the part of our brain that triggers orgasm and in the male ejaculation. So that's kind of interesting, right? Now on the other side is the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the part of our brain that calms us down and helps us to recover if we've faced some kind of fight or flight. So the parasympathetic nervous system, sort of returns all of our bodily functions back to what they had been before the event. So digestion starts up again. You mop up all that extra glucose. Your bowels start to move again, stuff like that. The parasympathetic nervous system is the part of our brain that actually causes vasocongestion. So in the male, that's going to be erection of the penis. In the female, it's going to be erection of the clitoris. And then also, the blood flow to the chest on both males and females. And then also vasocongestion of all the genital structures. So parasympathetic nervous system is the part of the brain that, allows us to be arousable. And then the sympathetic nervous system is what causes orgasm and ejaculation. So you can imagine if the sympathetic nervous system is the part that responds in the case of fight or flight, stressors, things like that, that if you've got an active sympathetic nervous system, that might actually interfere with sexual functioning. And you'd be very correct to make that assumption. So a lot of our sexual dysfunctions, times where things aren't functioning correctly, can be traced back to stress, right? We oftentimes blame stress for a lot of things, but given the way that our brains control our genitals, it makes a lot of sense that the sympathetic nervous system could actually interfere with arousal, since you need to be in sort of a state of calm and relaxed in order to have arousal. So the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in for arousal, and then the sympathetic nervous system kicks in for orgasm. And that makes a lot of sense too, doesn't it? Because we talked back in the past about Masters and Johnson's findings about physiological responding, and that during the arousal and plateau phase, the excitement and the plateau phase, the heart rate's up, breathing is more shallow, blood pressure is up, like all the signs that the person is under stress, right? Pupils dilate as part of arousal. So all of those things that go along with excitement and arousal are sympathetic nervous system functions. So it's pretty clear that we need to have a clear sort of parasympathetic mindset in order to start the process. And then our body starts to go into what appears to be a sympathetic nervous system response, and then that triggers orgasm. So you can imagine that there could be a lot of places that we're going to see interference in this system that could have consequences for sexual functioning. All right, well, I'm going to start with problems affecting males, and part of the reason for that is because there are a lot of them, and then also because in a heterosexual encounter, if coitus is the goal, which for a lot of sexual therapists, whether they're MDs or psychologists or whatever, for a lot of psychological therapists or sexual functioning therapists, the goal is to allow for coitus because of its connection to reproduction and all of those things, right? So without healthy male functioning, reproduction isn't going to be able to occur. And so a lot of effort has been placed in remedying the afflictions of males. We also have a lot of problems that affect females and treatments for those also. But what we're going to find is that a lot of times the problems affecting males have medicines available for them that are not necessarily available for females. So you can kind of see that medical urgency differential, right? Where the medical field seems to think it's more important for males to have erections and to reach orgasm, and a little bit less concerned about those functioning issues in females. So let's start with the males, and we'll come back and talk about females sometime later. Okay, so we're going to start with premature ejaculation. Some people call this early ejaculation. This is the most common male dysfunction as measured by what males complain about the most. So they may have other issues that might be more common, but they don't complain about that as much as premature ejaculation. One of the trickiest things about premature ejaculation is trying to actually just define what it is. Because what do you mean by premature or even early? They've tried to come up with a new term to make it sound a little less judgmental or a little less tied to some, distinct external thing. But either way, premature to what? Early with regard to what? So let's try and figure that out. Masters and Johnson offered a definition that I just would like to show my bias and say, this sounds a little harsh to me. The inability to control ejaculation long enough to satisfy your partner 50% of the time. The partner's satisfaction is the metric. And, if you think about Masters and Johnson, when they were doing their research, they were mostly looking at heterosexual males. So if it's the case, something that we will discuss a lot more as this chapter goes on, but I'll just foreshadow that the typical female does not report coitus as her primary way of reaching orgasm. So if that's true, if most females don't reach orgasm through coitus, how are we using a female satisfaction as a measure? I guess maybe it's psychological satisfaction, rather than reaching orgasm as the metric. I mean, this is a tough definition. It's hard to say exactly how we would even measure that. So luckily, Kaplan came up with a much simpler definition. She said that it's just involuntary control over ejaculation. So this is putting it back more on how the male is feeling about it and whether he feels like ejaculation is occurring when he wasn't ready. Like he didn't think it was supposed to be coming yet, and he wasn't ready. He didn't want it to be going now. So Kaplan's definition is the one that I tend to favor because it doesn't involve anybody else's satisfaction. It doesn't involve anything else like that. It's just about the person themselves, the male himself, who is reporting whether he feels like it's coming earlier than he expected. All right, so what can cause premature ejaculation? So I got this information from the mayoclinic.org. And there are psychological causes and there are biological causes. And you're going to notice that I do this for all the disorders because this is a psychology class. So even in disorders that maybe could be primarily explained through biology, we're going to talk about psychological causes also. So one psychological factor is what we call learning. So if we have learned a certain habit, our bodies may be responding to that habit in ways that we're not happy with, but it's what we've sort of taught our body to do. So for example, if you have a person who, when they were younger, when they masturbated, they did it quickly because they didn't want to be caught while they were still living at home. Like they didn't want anybody walking in on them or whatever. So that can become a habit, right? Like I'm trying to get this over with kind of feeling. And so their body with just minimal stimulation can get excited enough to reach orgasm without intention. So we call those habits, when we've learned something and it's become kind of ingrained in us, we call those habits. So psychologically, patterns formed during early life could be that they were rushing to avoid detection. Maybe they were rushing because they felt guilty about what they were doing. Maybe they were raised in a situation where they were given the message that masturbation is bad, masturbation is wrong, or maybe they were having sexual contact with someone else, but they felt like the behaviors they were engaging in weren't good, or they knew that somebody their age wasn't supposed to be doing this, or, they were with somebody else and they were worried that, a pregnancy could happen or an STI could happen or something. And they were feeling guilty, but it was so pleasurable. And so they learned to rush is the idea. Learning to rush can become a habit, and then now you have to sort of unlearn that. One of the good things about a learning theory explanation of anything is that if we assert that you can learn something, then we assume that you can unlearn it. So if you learned this pattern, we can re-pattern the person so that they can actually have the, a change in the stimulation, stuff like that. Premature ejaculation can also occur when there are relationship issues. This is all unconscious, so I don't mean this in any kind of purposeful, way. But sometimes when there are problems in a relationship, but a person still has, sexual drive and sexual need, they may not be wanting to actually satisfy their partner's needs. They just want to release their own sexual tension. And so when you have relationship issues, those can interfere with sexual functioning, and again, then can become a habit, right? So if the person is experiencing some resentment towards their partner, but this is their primary outlet for sexual behavior, they may engage in sex acts and get it over with quickly so they can reduce contact or limit the probability that their partner would be fulfilled or whatever they're doing. And like I said, it's probably going to be unconscious. They're probably not saying to themselves, okay, yeah, I'm going to just do it really quick so that they won't have any fun. I'm not saying that they're thinking that, but more of that unconscious kind of, I'm just trying to release my own sexual tension. And so they may, again, learn to rush. They may not want their partner to be satisfied, and so they're only worried about their own needs, things like that. Anxiety. If the person is nervous or anxious, that can boost that sympathetic nervous system a lot faster and can trigger ejaculation a lot faster than if the person is much more relaxed. If they were in a relaxed state of mind, they started to get aroused, and then now the anxiety is kicking in on top of what is normal, response to sexual contact. You can end up with premature ejaculation. All right, there are also some biological causes, and these get into a lot of things having to do with hormones. For one thing, some that have been studied and tied to premature ejaculation are testosterone imbalances, too much prolactin, which is, you might remember that hormone from our discussion about breastfeeding. Prolactin is the hormone that is secreted that helps to produce breast milk. I'm saying it slowly because it's like, okay, I really want to emphasize. I mean, obviously this is not something that should be primary in a typical male's endocrine profile. And so prolactin can be something that would have an effect on orgasm response. Vasopressin is a hormone that actually affects the dilation of the arteries and veins and things like that. And so, if we build up blood pressure too quickly, that can cause ejaculation. Too much oxytocin, that's a hormone that makes us feel cuddly and like that. And so that could be something that would interfere and cause ejaculation to occur too quickly. So lots of hormones. These 4 have been studied. Neurotransmitter levels. The ones that they've focused on the most is serotonin and endorphins. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter that we secrete when we're feeling calm and content. And when it's out of balance, it can make us feel anxious or it can make us feel depressed, and it can have impacts on ejaculation. If you're feeling anxious, it can boost that sympathetic nervous system and cause, too much blood pressure raise and too much heart rate increase, and that can cause early ejaculation. Endorphins are the neurotransmitters that, there's a whole class of them. And some of them have to do with blood pressure, and some of them have to do with temperature regulation, and some of them have to do with pain management. So endorphins being out of balance can cause the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems to be out of balance. The ejaculatory reflex, there's sort of, in a normal functioning, ejaculation process, there's a buildup, right? Where you go through the excitement phase, then you stay at the plateau phase for some amount of time, and additional stimulation is just sort of keeping you at that same level of arousal. And then there's the spike of the ejaculatory reflex that causes orgasm. When something is out of order in that ejaculatory reflex, it doesn't take very much stimulation to cause the orgasmic spike very early. It doesn't take much stimulation to make it happen at all. Thyroid problems, which some of these hormonal things could be attributable to thyroid problems. If you have inflammation or infection of the prostate or the urethra, it can make oversensitivity that actually makes ejaculation come much more quickly. And then it could be inherited traits. There is some evidence that's showing that people who have premature ejaculation oftentimes have fathers who had that same problem or brothers who have that same problem. And so it could be that they've inherited a gene or something. And so that's being explored. And then finally, nerve damage. I mean, a lot of times when we think about nerve damage, we think about a place going numb. And that can be true for nerve damage, but it also can be that you make a nerve hyperactive. And so that can trigger orgasm with no stimulation at all, let alone a little bit of stimulation with a partner. So nerve damage can make you hypersensitive as well. All right, so what do we do about it? Well, we have psychological treatments. The first one we'll call the squeeze technique. And this is where the man during masturbation or the partner during sexual activity, when, it's seeming like ejaculation is on the horizon pretty quickly, then the partner squeezes, or the man while he's masturbating will squeeze. It's important to note you want to squeeze enough that it sort of disrupts the sensations that the penis is experiencing, but not so hard that you're harming anyone. You don't want to have like an iron grip on the penis. It's just a little bit sort of a tactile stop message. Sort of just you squeeze the penis enough to make it not feel like let's keep going, let's keep going. So the squeeze technique is oftentimes combined with the stop-start technique. And so the stop-start technique is where you start to engage in some kind of sexual activity, either alone or with a partner. A lot of sex therapists find that men who are suffering from premature ejaculation have a partner that they can work with. And so it works really well if the partner is involved, because a lot of times things that work when you're by yourself kind of go out the window when you have, external stimulation that you're not in control of, and now it's a whole different context. And so if you can practice with a partner, it's best. So the stop-start technique is you start the sexual activity, and then when it seems like, the man is getting ready to ejaculate, then you stop, and then ideally apply the squeeze technique. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to do the stop-start technique, you're supposed to stop for like 30 seconds, maybe even start to have a little loss of erection, and then start over again, so that you can ultimately, over time, and it can take weeks of practicing this technique, over time, the man starts to recognize in his own thoughts and in his own body and his own, state, what feels like impending ejaculation. And then he can sort of mentally stop so that he can then enjoy the experience as long as he wants to, rather than, feeling this ejaculatory inevitability where it just, oh, I guess I'm just riding this wave and there's nothing I can do about it. So stop, start, and squeeze techniques. Now, Sense8 Focus is going to be, the treatment for everything under the heteropsychological treatment. So I might as well introduce you now to the Sense8 Focus technique. It was introduced by Masters and Johnson, and the intention of this technique is to get the partners to focus on sensations rather than on orgasm. One of the things that Masters and Johnson pointed out is that a lot of times in couples, once they start having sexual activity and they've, had orgasms together, they start to become very goal-oriented towards sort of achieving that again. And so Masters and Johnson said a lot of, sexual dysfunction can be cured through sort of dialing back and learning to enjoy just what it feels like to caress each other. Just spend some time inhaling each other's breath. Be close to each other without the goal of sexual satisfaction. And so for people who are suffering from premature ejaculation, if they were going to go through Sense8 Focus, the first thing they would be told is you don't get to have sex. And for a lot of people, that's the cure to their problem, is that somebody outside of them told them, no, you can't have sex anymore. But in this particular kind of situation with Sense8 Focus, the goal would be to touch everything but the penis. If ejaculation happens even though there wasn't direct penile stimulation, that's okay. Let's just focus on each other and what it feels like. And there's a lot less pressure put on the fact that, oh no, you ejaculated, now everything's over with. So I have a little video I'm going to queue up because, as always, there's like a WikiHow for everything. So I'm going to let you watch the video, and it's well done as far as complete accuracy. It's a little, cheesy in the sense of it's hard to demonstrate Sense8 Focus with people who are fully clothed, and it's kind of, but hopefully you'll get the principles and the steps and things like that from this WikiHow. So enjoy that video, and I will see you on the other side.